Hey everybody, welcome back to the Photo Lab. In last week's video I addressed some stuff and I called it the elephant in the room. And this week's video is directly related to that and the reason I made last week's video. And that's because I did a video not too long ago talking about your program modes on your camera. And in that video and other videos I mentioned that I don't use manual that often. And I get people who always comment, because they obviously know more than me, saying, well, he's obviously not a professional if he doesn't use manual all the time. And obviously he doesn't know what he's doing if he doesn't use manual all the time. And people contact me and ask me, why is it you don't use manual all the time? Why is it you never use manual? Well, what I said in the video was I use other modes more than I use manual. And it's true. In an average day, an average week of shooting for the studio, I shoot scenic pictures, I shoot wildlife pictures, I'll do copy work in the studio, I may do a session in the studio, I'll do sessions outside, I may do product photography, that may be outside on location, that may be in studio. And there's all different settings that I use to accomplish what I do. Do I use manual? I use it a lot. Do I like manual? I like it a lot. But over a course of a week or even a course of a day, how much I use manual varies a lot. Other modes get used more for some things than manual. For instance, and I've said this many times, for when I'm shooting with my 600mm lens, when I'm walking around with it, have it in my arms, I'll have it on aperture priority. I set it to f9 and away I go from there. If I see something, I can put it up to my eye, I can focus, I can take a picture. Now, will it be perfectly exposed? 50-50 chance that it will or it won't. But I caught whatever that was. If it was something fleeting, I caught it. If it's something that's hanging around, I can then turn to a different mode. Possibly would be manual, and I'll shoot some from there. Maybe if it's moving between sunshine and shadows and so on and so forth, I'll keep it on aperture priority. I'll use exposure compensation to dial in my exact exposure. But I don't necessarily use manual. Now, if I'm in the studio, 100% it's manual. Why? Because with studio lights, shooting anything else is ridiculous. Manual is the only way to go. You set your lights, you set your ISO, you set your shutter speed, you set your aperture. You can shoot for months as long as you don't change anything and everything will be exposed perfectly. So yes, I do use manual in the right situation. Now, what I tell all my students is this. Manual is the most consistent mode that you can use to take pictures. But understand, it's not necessarily that you're going to get the best pictures from it if you don't know what you're doing. That you may not get the best pictures if you're rushing. You may not get the best pictures if the light situation's changing rapidly. When I used to do weddings, I would often use program mode for when the bride pulled up to the front of the church in a limo, got out of the limo, walked from the limo into the church, into the waiting room. I would use program mode. Why? Because the light usually went from darkness of the limo to the brightness of her standing outside with the white wedding dress reflecting all the light, to the darkness of a canopy as she walked closer to the church, as the darkness of the church, and then into the room where she was waiting for the wedding, which was probably dark and possibly even had some stained glass, which was bringing different light and so on and so forth. And I used program mode because it was much more consistent for what I was doing at the time. But when I shot the formal pictures, I would use manual because it was more consistent and we weren't changing lighting situations constantly. There was times when I shot weddings, I shot in program mode for the formals because they wanted certain things and the lighting conditions were changing rapidly or where we were shooting was changing rapidly. And I just used it because it worked. If you're using manual, take your time, learn manual, learn how to set your ISO, learn how to set your shutter speed, learn how to set your aperture, learn what it does, learn to adjust it, to tweak it, not to settle for an over or underexposed picture, but to get it exactly where it's supposed to be. Take your time and manual will work wonderful. But don't get sucked down that rabbit hole from these quote unquote so-called experts that will tell you you have to shoot manual, or you have to shoot this lens, or you have to shoot this camera. Or these people, 99% of them don't have any pictures to show. All they're doing is just spouting off. They're just trying to get likes on YouTube, or they're just trying to put posts out there to make themselves feel good. Take it that works for you and use what works for you, and ignore the rest of the stuff. If manual works for you, use it. If you're shooting sports and it's cloudy and it's sunny and it's cloudy and it's sunny and you're taking your son's picture, manual's probably not going to be the best mode, because you don't want to spend the time to adjust the camera and to keep doing all the stuff you have to do. Shoot it on program mode. Shoot it on full auto. Shoot it on idiot mode. Shoot it on whatever, if it works for what you're doing. If it doesn't, then change. Also, don't discount other modes just because you've heard something. Try them. Try different settings. I always tell people one of the best ways of learning is to take a notebook, to write down the settings on your camera, start playing with it, and then when you're done playing, go back to those settings that you had originally that were working for you. And if you do want to incorporate something that you've tried, then incorporate it. But don't just make changes just for the sake of making changes. So I'm going to get back to work here. It's another beautiful day in Southern Alberta. I got a bunch of stuff to get done here, and then I think tonight I'm going to go home and sit outside and have a really nice supper. So have a great day, and get out there and take some pictures, and we'll talk to you again. Bye-bye now.